Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, is the fifth installment in George Miller's over 40-year-old world. This weekend it hits theaters, and to say it was a completely different movie than I expected would be an understatement. It's led by one of the more interesting actresses of our generation and director of Happy Feet, one of my formative movies. Furiosa has been one of my most anticipated sequels in recent memory, and I am so damn excited to talk about it. If you want to hear more of my thoughts on Furiosa along with a bunch of new movies, you can check out my podcast, link in the description down below. And also, over 97% of you guys who watch these videos aren't subscribed, so if you do enjoy this video, feel free to hit that button so you don't miss out on more. But don't waste any more time, let's get into it. Furiosa is a prequel to 2015's Mad Max Fury Road, in which we actually follow Furiosa on her quest to exact revenge on those who'd killed her mother. Speaking of Fury Road, this is not Fury Road in the best ways possible. I went into this movie absolutely loving Fury Road. It's one of the greatest action films ever made, and for that it's amazing, but that's its own thing. This being a prequel, also a sequel, I was a little bit nervous going in because I didn't want a Fury Road 2, but the first hour of this movie is honestly so anti-Fury Road that I took a step back and I realized that we're in for something so different that has the potential to be absolutely amazing. And the best comparison that we can make for Fury Road is actually Mad Max 3, in the sense that it's based in a lot of this world's lore, which I personally really enjoyed. As I watched all of the Mad Max movies for the very first time leading up to Furiosa, I was really interested in the lore. And in Fury Road, we don't necessarily dive into that. We just get these kind of baseline characters. Aside from Nicholas Holt's character, there isn't much character development being done, and this movie definitely lacks in some character areas, which I'll touch on in just a second here. But for the most part, I felt like the fact that we were able to explore the world, explore the leaders, the communities, these different tyrants, and also on this revenge quest with Furiosa, I think they balanced all of those story elements really, really well. And this is where I want to talk about the performances, because we have obviously three main performances, but the two standouts that are the leads of this film. I do want to start with Tom Burke, who plays Perry Ortian Jack. I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong, but Tom Burke is absolutely amazing in this film. I think this is the first movie I've ever seen him in, and he is absolutely awesome. And then we have Anya Taylor-Joy as Furiosa. I think the best compliment to give to Anya Taylor-Joy's performance is the fact that she uses her voice with such gravitas in this film, in the sense that she doesn't have an absurd amount of dialogue, but every single time she uses her voice, it is so powerful and it's so impactful. And the minimal dialogue is something that we did see in Fury Road, but I didn't really notice it because you were always bombarded by action. Whereas in this movie, you're not always bombarded by action, but the lead character also isn't talking that much. And so I think it works and it's a great balance act. I think Anya Taylor-Joy perfectly plays this middle part. But the final performance I want to quickly touch on before getting into the pacing of this film was Chris Hemsworth as Dr. Dementis. I just want to note, he might have the greatest aura of any character this year, aside from like Paul Atreides. Furiosa definitely has some aura by the end of this film, but every single time Dr. Dementis is on screen, first of all, the name is already plus 100 aura, but every single scene, he just brings such weight, and it does feel like he's doing just this crazy, absurd performance at times, but Chris Hemsworth puts his all into it. I've always loved Chris Hemsworth's performances, but I'd be lying if they said they had real range. It always felt like, kind of with The Rock, I was just looking at Chris Hemsworth because he always just felt the same to me. But nevertheless, I actually think Dementis is just such a balls to the wall, insane character, but it also works because though it's super insane, there's actually a heart to it that's kind of within Furiosa, and we kind of get that clash at the very end of the film. But I want to get into the pacing, which is my biggest pro and con of this film, because the first hour of this movie is basically a Dementis movie where we're just looking at Furiosa when she was younger, and I guess I wasn't expecting it. This is what threw me off the most about the movie. This movie split into chapters, and it's a nice way to split up the film, but a lot of it just is off-putting because Anya Taylor-Joy is not in this movie for a good chunk of it. The first 2-3 chapters, honestly the whole first act, feels like a prologue to the movie, which I just wasn't expecting, and I'm kind of neutral on it. I guess I want to rewatch it, but I feel like the rewatchability is not going to be high because the first act was so slow to me. But we obviously have to get into the action. It's Mad Max. It's obviously amazing. George Miller at like 900 years old still has all the sauce, and I need it. There are two standout action sequences, but there are a bunch of chases throughout the entirety of this film. The first war rig chase with Furiosa, she's like goes under the war rig, on top of it, through it. It's so exciting and it's so visceral. And then attacking Dementis, that one is also an amazing sequence. And honestly, I do want to view this movie in 4DX. I watched it in a Dolby theater and it felt like 4DX, so I don't know how this isn't going to give people back problems. But the action is really where Fury Road and Furiosa differ. I think Fury Road is one long action chase sequence, whereas Furiosa is action mixed with character work. And there's this one like paragliding type of thing. It's like a parachute off the motorcycle and they're gliding. It is the coolest thing I've ever seen. I was not expecting it. They basically just figure out a way to innovate all the action in Fury Road and make it bigger and better. But I also think that is where arguably the biggest flaw of this movie comes in, and that is the big visual problem. I don't want to harp on this for too long, but this movie, it doesn't look amazing just because it is bigger than Fury Road, and George Miller has only gotten older in age, so they're not going to do as much of it practically. And I know they didn't do all of Fury Road practically, obviously, but it just straight up doesn't look good at times. I hate to make this comparison, but there's a lot of sequences where they're on top of the war rig, and sometimes the composition literally looks like Thor: Love and Thunder and the Flash levels of bad. I think that the camera work and techniques and editing are really interesting, but the composition, like the VFX, it's glaringly bad sometimes. I will say though, I want to talk about the thematic nature of this film because this more than Fury Road, I actually connected with to an extent, and the characters, ideas, and problems. But before we get into that, my last con of this movie, I think there's a lot of script and writing problems, and more so just scene problems as well. Because my problem isn't necessarily the lack of dialogue in this movie, but it's rather how corny the dialogue itself gets. And so much of this movie, for lack of better wording, feels janky. Like there's running that's sped up 0.5 speed, there's wide angles that get up close to faces, and I can look over that as it being a creative choice, and it just makes everything a little bit more visceral and exciting and a little more fast paced. But I can't look over the minimal dialogue in this movie because it doesn't work towards the character development. This movie has way more non-action sequences than Fury Road, and I truly don't feel like it does a lot more for a lot of the characters. And I think the thematic stuff is all rooted in this very, very slow first act, and then you have basically 2 full acts of straight action, and then the ending where you kind of throw in thematic things again. But the thematic nature of this film is really where I connected to it more than Fury Road. I found myself actually grasping at a lot of those ideas of memories being taken away and wanting them back. That drive to getting your memories back makes you a different person than you were in the memories. And I think this idea is really cool, but sadly the execution is based in the super badass action, but minimal and ineffective dialogue. It just didn't make it hit as hard. But nevertheless, Furiosa, a Mad Max saga, is visceral. It is based so deeply in action, yet it finds a way to be thematically prevalent. It's not Mad Max Fury Road, but in the best ways possible. Overall, I'm going to give Furiosa an 8.5 out of 10. If you've seen or want to check this movie out, let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. And again, over 97% of you guys who watch these videos aren't subscribed. So if you do enjoy this video, make sure to hit the subscribe button down below. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Peace.